My man, Roy Sturgeon, man. Welcome back to the platform. I'm really happy and excited to see you again. I'll be honest with you, man. I feel like if I known you for so many years, and you're the one of the guys that I feel so familiar with and so comfortable with when I'm talking to, and that's a plus for me at least. So welcome again to the platform, man. It's good to have you.
Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for having me back. Pretty cool to talk to you again. I'm glad you wanted us back.
Yeah, for sure, man. I see the program that you're providing down there, and I'm really intrigued by it. I like the videos, and I like what you're doing, and I think it reaches an audience that needs to be heard.
I think you're right. I think you're so correct on that. I think we're getting a lot of people that on like my side of it, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Like I think a lot of people, the younger generations, miss that era. They miss the racing part of the bush tracks and the B tracks, and like I was fortunate enough to ride at all of them. I think there's a big disconnect there in a lot of different ways. Like I think there's a big disconnect where there's really not a training ground for a bunch of these kids coming up. They basically get thrown right into the frying pan to get going, and a lot of these kids, they're just not ready to do that. When I started riding as a kid, if you couldn't make it in the city, you'd drop down to the B tracks, and if you were having trouble there, then you could drop down to the bushes or the fair meets, and you could actually learn a skill. And because back then, at least you could get on enough horses, even on a weekend, you'd ride 8 or 10 races a day, and eventually you're going to start to learn your craft. Where unfortunately, I don't see a bunch of that happening anymore. And I also think the big side of it is the money got so big in a lot of these places here, we forgot about the racing aspect of it, where for the most part it was fun. Be racing, bush racing especially, it never really was about the money. It was more about racing your horse against mine and different people. I won this weekend, so I supplied the beer and the steaks, and the next weekend you won and it was your turn, and it was more family and it was fun. Everybody was involved, and I don't see that anymore. Unfortunately, I see a lot of negativity. Everybody's fighting for a smaller pool as far as racing days and mounts of horses to get on and different things. And for me, I just don't want to be that negative person. Like I watch what we get to do with these kids. We just had a clinic here. I just finished this afternoon. I had 12 new kids, and they're all excited. They're pumped and they're wanting to go. And some of these kids they're in our regular riding lesson program, but this weekend they got to experience it. They all kind of went to the gate the first time, and we've got a couple old horses, and they just trot and canter out of there. But that's where these kids need to start. They don't need to go to the track and have one that's going to blast out of there and a horse they can't control. We use basically in our program our lesson horses for the most part. The program is basically taken on a life of its own. I counted the other day, I think we've got about 26 or 27 kids in the program now, from kids that are beginners to kids that ride very, very advanced. So it's a lot of fun. We're looking at doing a few different things this year. Big thing we got coming up here in about just over a month, we got Pinoca Stampede, where the kids have been invited back again. Last year when the kids raced there, they raced in front of 12,000 people every night up there, and these kids raced very competitively. So that's pretty cool. And we've got lots of other things in the works here for the summer. We're going to do a big derby at our place here in August for the kids. And kind of what we're starting to do, we've actually got a live auction coming up here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. I can give you more details. I'll actually know more about it the first of the week. But basically trying to support this program. Like we've got lots of lower income families and stuff in the program. And this thing has got to truthfully outgrow what Chrissy and I can provide for these kids anymore, for the most part. And we see like a huge, huge need for it. So how we get that going more, I'm not sure, but I don't see it stopping anytime soon. So I just think we got to be a little more heads up just to try and make things go for these kids and for what we're trying to do.
Well, I think it's an awesome program. I think there's different levels, especially what you started was something from your heart, and
Yeah.
sometimes these things just grow, and sometimes you need to probably shift and get a little bit more help
Yeah,
to
and
figure out.
that's about where we're at right now. Like
Yeah.
same thing too. Like in the last, not even a year, I bought 12 new horses for this program because we were literally wearing out the horses that we had. Like I've got more demand than what we can produce. So we're, and it's all worked out well. Like I've got some younger kids that ride very, very well in the program. So sending these greener horses, they've taken them horses on. They'll race for their first time this year. Like a bunch of the videos that I've been sharing with you and stuff, we're gate schooling them new horses and getting them ready to go. And we're, just trying to figure out what horses match horses and kids, just to make the races so they're fun and they're competitive and they look good.
Yeah, yeah. I never thought about that actually. I never thought about the fact that not enough horses, and
Yeah.
I just figure maybe the kids brought their own horses, but then I see how difficult that could be also, especially with lower income households and so forth. I've
Very,
never really thought about that.
and they're all, well, I wouldn't say they're all ours, but I think in the program, there's 2 horses that come here that aren't ours. Everything else is ours. Like we supply them for the kids, and it's hard because not all these horses just make it. Some of them, you take some of these quiet saddle horses and you run them a few times and get them razzed up a little bit, and they're too much for these kids. They come alive, and it's the hard part too is like in the lesson barn, we get some of these kids that were riding some of these horses, they're kicking and kicking and kicking on in the arena to kind of make these horses go. And you keep telling them, when we get to the track, these things will come alive, and they don't really understand it until they get down there on them. And these horses, when they get down to our track, they've trained enough and they've raced enough and they've galloped enough that they, in their own version, they become a racehorse that day.
Yeah, I could tell because I could see that even the small ones, they're ready to go. They want to go too because they miss
very
the
much
action.
So. Very much so. And that's the hard thing too, because our biggest thing is, as much fun as it is, we got to keep these kids safe. So I'm always on the lookout for different horses, and I'm fortunate enough, I have some people every once in a while and say, this horse I think will do, come try him or whatever. But I'm always on the lookout for horses. Kind of a big step where we're in right now. A bunch of our littler kids that have been racing the last 2 to 4 years, they're now in the phase of moving up within the next year into bigger horses. And that's going to be a tough transition because the ponies that them kids have been riding are super, super good. But now to go to the next level, that's an ask. All of a sudden they're on bigger horses that take a little bit more hold and run harder and everything else. So we got to be very careful of, how we transition those kids into that next level.
Well, I was going to ask you about that because those kids, after riding around the track for a few times and for maybe a few months or so, they want to excel. They want to go
well,
broad.
They try hard.
They want to get right into it. And for you, I'm pretty sure you want to offer that too. So you got what you got, but to a point, it might be a good opportunity to see what else is out there that and perhaps somebody might want to provide a space or something for you to maybe do a test. I don't know what do you have in mind?
We've got, like I've got quite a few people in different industries. Truthfully, we use quite a few of them. We can get them as off-track standard breds. They work very well. They run fast enough for these kids that they get this, enough speed for them. And the good thing about them, most of them are super, super quiet. Like once we get them going and kind of galloping a little bit, they're away. And we use actually quite a few of them. They work super well in the program. I think the misconception about a lot of people on my side of it when they're trying to, either sell me or donate horses to the program, they're trying to give me something that's like super hot or, like a horse that can really, really run. Well, we really are not after that. Like I want something that's quiet and broke and it's safe. Like even these horses that can't run, you run them for a year and those horses, they figure out how to run as it is, because you're training them like a racehorse, and pretty soon, they get a little better stride to them and they figure it out. And then same thing too, lots of them after a while, they like it, they start to roll pretty good. Like we got a few of them that, just kind of got going here this year, and you blast them out of the gate, and I could pretty much outrun them on foot. But like in 2 months from now, they won't be the same horses. But in their life of previous life, they've never been rode that way. So in their defense, we basically got to teach them how to run. So, but it's hard too, because like we spent, like this weekend we had all these new kids here, but I had some of the old kids come. But the old kids that were here, we just stood their horses in the gate all weekend. We never broke a horse. Like, of those ones, like they need to stand and they need to be quiet, because we run them enough that when we load them with them kids, they need to stand there and they need to be safe for them kids. And that needs to be the hard thing. And we have too, like when we race on a race night for here, like when we do our derbies and stuff, we probably have altogether 35 to 50 people here helping that night, between
Nice.
people in the gate and all the stuff that we have here. Every night we gate school or break from the gate or race, we have either me or my stepdaughter as outriders, which I was in for years for real, and she helped me at the track a little bit, so she's done it a little bit. So we kind of take turns out riding, because sometimes I'll jump on and ride, or when she's riding, so we kind of take turns that way. We always have at least one or two. We're very fortunate. We got 3 moms here that are nurses, so we always have at least somebody that's qualified here for that. We've got starting to train like a new crew of mostly dads, like to help in the gate. So we're getting that pretty solid, because you just can't pick somebody off the street and say, okay, tonight you're going to work in the gate. So it's it's hard. So we're starting to get a pretty good community to do some of this stuff, and it's fun nights.
Yeah, I was going to ask you something about that, because, like, say for instance, the kids that want to get involved, is this program for city kids? Because I'll loosen it. What I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get at, because like city kids don't understand the amount of stuff that goes into horse riding. And the amount of work, exactly.
Yeah.
And have you ever run into that kind of situation?
Oh yeah, very much so. But see, like, and that was a big part of this weekend for these new kids. Like when they come lesson nights, like their horse is tacked and they ride their horse and then they go home, because that's just kind of the way that end of our program is set up. They don't really help much in the barn, because basically my horses go from lesson to lesson every night and then we're done. So they don't get to do that. But in this program, they do it all. Like when they get here, like the last 3 days when they get here in the morning, they do all the chores before we ever touch a horse. Then we grab the horses and then we get them ready. And like I was telling the kids today, I said, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, we're spending more time, lots of days, looking after these horses than we are actually riding. Because like we got one old horse, you'll see him, he's kind of a big black horse that we use in the videos, and there's generally only 2 kids coming out of the gate at a time. Well, he's kind of our first time horse for these kids. Well, he's super good, but at the same time too, some nights that old guy will pop out of the gate 3 or 4 times in a night. Well, you can't continue to ask them horses to give like that all the time and not look after them. They just, it doesn't matter, like anything else, eventually it's going to take their toll on them. So if you're not looking after these animals correctly, we just and you understand that they have to be well maintained and looked after. But the flip side of it is, if these kids don't want to do that part of it, then they're just not in the program. And I get it every night, or different days or nights or whatever. You'll get a kid and say, look, I can't stay tonight, I got this going on. And I understand that. But you'll get some kids, they want to come and just do all the fun stuff and then leave. And we just tell them, you know what, you're either in it with everybody or you're not, because it's a big team, and it takes a big team to do it all. And the older kids are now super good. Like I said, we did this clinic this weekend, and the majority of the older kids, they truthfully probably did more teaching than I did, because they were going in company with these younger kids. They're beside them on a horse and telling them what to do, where I'm basically standing on the ground and telling or saying what I can see from the ground, where they're actually on a horse beside them, actually doing the teaching. And it's cool to watch that, because they can do it. It's pretty cool to watch it all.
Now, for your program, are there different levels? Like, in most programs, they have level A, B, C, D.
Yep.
What's the levels in your program?
So we go like colors. So red level is kind of our first level. So that's kind of introductory, and then yellow, and then, basically up from there. Like, we got some kids that ride very, very advanced. Like Chrissy's daughters, like my stepdaughters, like these kids ride, they could go anywhere and ride. They just don't choose to. This is their fun and this is what they want to do. But like they could go anywhere and race ride. They're that good. And then we've got a couple other kids that are in the program that ride very well too. They are too big to make riders, but doing what we do, they can do this forever. And that was the other thing too. A few years ago, we changed the name of the program just to the Jockeys Club because it was junior jockeys. And now we've changed it because we've got some of these kids in college and university that still want to ride. Well, the cool thing about that, it's our racetrack at home here. It's our program. So we can't say, well, you're 18, so you can't ride anymore. Right. It's hard too, because like even at the races, like I talk to different people, and people are struggling. They can't get the help. So, to keep our program going, it's pretty hard for me to say, okay, well, you're 18 years old now, so you're done and we never want to see you again after, you've seen these kids for like 5 or 6 years and they put a lot of time and effort into it. Like we've got a couple of kids that are in college and university now and they're pretty much gone, but every once in a while they're home and they're like, can we come ride tonight? Well, absolutely you can. So, and it's pretty cool to get some of them kids to come back for that.
Now, I know also that there's been a lot of people who've been asking questions about the program because they see the videos and they want to know where is the program and how do you get involved and stuff like that. Now,
yeah,
what's the fee like? Is it like a quarterly fee? Is it monthly, weekly? How does this work?
So we've kind of changed that a little bit too. There's kind of an upfront fee like at the start of the year, like kind of like hockey or ringette or anything like that is very reasonable. And then lesson nights, it's so much a lesson per night. But the realities of it is most of these kids can't afford all the lessons that they are getting. And it's, like I got some kids right now that are riding 6-7 times a week because we're trying to get them ready, go to Ponoka and some of these places. Well, they just can't afford it. But so that's kind of always been Chrissy's and our deal is like, you pay kind of what you can afford and then we will help you on the flip side of it. But it's got to the point where, and I'm not like I'm trolling for money or anything like this, but it's got to the point where we do start to need some help because we got, our expenses are getting higher than what it's, what it can maintain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because you got the animals and then you got to run the program. You probably got to get help from outriders, maybe, perhaps.
No, actually, no. That part is all good. Truthfully, what our biggest issue is right now, and it's been like this the last couple of years because it's been kind of dry out here, is our feed. That is our biggest thing. Like our feed went from 3 years ago to $40 to $50 a round bale to $160 to $200 a bale. Well, these things eat a lot of feed. And that's my biggest thing. I don't ever want to or intend to make any money out of the program myself personally. Like that's not what it's about, but it just needs to look after itself.
Nice. I'm pretty sure there might be some kind of government conversation in there somewhere. Or do you guys not deal with the government down there in Alberta?
No, we do, but it's kind of hard to get anything that kind of that way. What we're looking to do actually, and this will be this auction that we've got coming up in the next probably 2 to 3 weeks. Like I said, I'll confirm some stuff here the first of the week how it's going to go. But basically, you'll be able to either donate to the club, or you'll be able to. We're going to actually put all the horses online. So basically, you can buy a horse and name him for the year, and then that horse will race, under your name or that way around. We've got. We're looking for some live auction stuff, like to be able to sell. Actually, I talked to Mike Smith the other day. He sent me 2 signed pictures that we will actually auction them off. I got a really good friend of mine out here that runs an auction company. So once we get that all figured out, it'll be online. It'll be a timed auction like through those guys. So like I said, once I get that all figured out here in the next little bit, I'll let you know how that's going to go. Probably Taylor, the one that Chrissy's daughter that always does like the track talk videos. Once we get that kind of figured out, we'll get a video like that and then I'll send it to you guys and then post it if you guys would like.
Well, that's real cool. And you mentioned Mike Smith, so you got some really good connections.
Mike Smith, I talk to him all the time. I talk to him probably 3 to 5 times a week about these kids. And not just him. There's lots of people. Like it's a pretty cool program, and it's we got lots of people really following what's happening and what's going on. Like we got the third week of June, we're actually taking a bunch of our older kids and we're going to Las Vegas. We've been invited to go to the Jockeys and Jeans benefit, so we're going down there. So we're going to Caesar's Palace because that's where it's at this year. So we're gonna, me and also all the kids are gonna get to meet like a bunch of Hall of Fame riders. Then we're basically fly home. We're a day home, and then we race for 4 nights of Pinoca Stampede before the wagons every night. So we got a lot on our plate here in the next little while.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I remember last time we spoke, you were mentioning something about even perhaps coming up here to Ontario,
Yeah.
to Woodbine, maybe for I don't know, demonstration, something like that.
Well,
Is
we were coming last year, and then actually just before we left, with everything that was still going on, they actually canceled our plane tickets a few days before we were actually supposed to go. So it didn't work to reschedule because I was actually coming out to the Queen's Plate to actually ride because Robbie's a friend of mine and he invited me to come out and outride. And then the girls were going to put on a demo race. And we're still talking a little bit too. We're actually coming out there in August, towards the end of August. So we'll hopefully get that flanged up this year too. And another thing that I'm super open to, I'd really like to be able to go somewheres and put on a clinic somewheres in an area for these kids that are wanting to do something like this. Like I'd be all over that.
well, that'd be real cool. I guess it's a matter of just kind of organizing the space and the people who's running that space.
Right.
That sounds really cool. It sounds really interesting too. I think it's a really good initiative.
Well, you gotta, to me, I get this all the time. It's like, well, you're hearing, well, we can't get any help at the track, and we can't get any help at the track. And then I watch some of these kids that are trying to go to the track. They're just not ready to go. When I started, it was a lot different. There was thousands of horses here, and like I said, there was, all different degrees of racing out here, which there was everywhere's. We don't have that anymore. And the biggest thing we don't have the pool of horses to draw from. Like when I was a kid starting, I'd gallop 20 to 40 horses every morning. Like now, these good exercise riders, they'll be lucky if they can get on 10 because there's no more to get on than that. So that's how we learned our craft.
Is there a concern about that?
Huge, huge.
I was thinking. I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine, and we were talking. We were wondering, like, so what happened? Because I'm watching the Japanese racing, and I'm watching their events, and I'm seeing like almost every race is filled, and it
Yeah.
has like 12, 13, 14 horses in almost every race.
Yeah.
And now here in Vancouver and down in Alberta and Winnipeg, the horses are like very skimpy.
Yeah, like it's the sad thing too, and I don't want to be negative, but out here especially, it's dying. It's dying rapidly. And like when I was a kid and first started riding, like I can remember in Stampede Park, that's when we'd start in the spring. They turned 5,000 sets of papers into the office in the spring. And if you had a 4-year-old maiden, like if he didn't run second and get beat, if he was beat more than 2 lengths, he was cooled out before and off the grounds before you even got him cooled out because there was that many horses here. And there was like Stampede Park in those days would house about 2,000 horses, but there was a couple, tracks outside and farm tracks. So that was the pool of horses, and we were racing 5 days a week, 10 races a day, and we would race, basically from mid to end of March till the end of November every year. Well, we don't have that anymore. Like I think when I first started riding, there was close to like 200 days out here on the prairies, like at the A tracks alone between Calgary and Edmonton. Now I think this year they've got like 45, something like that. And most days they run, if they have a 7-race card, that's a big day.
Oh man,
There's just no horses.
I was just concerned because I mean, for the horses in general, I mean, I'm just trying to look at the races in different areas and saying, okay, well, for instance, not to mention the Japanese too often, but I mean, they seem to be excelling with the horses because every race is filled and have so many horses in the race. And over here is a little bit different.
And the other side of it is too, and this goes back quite a few years, and it's just progressively, I'm not saying got worse, but it, basically it blindsided the industry, and I'm probably got people that are probably going to be not very happy about what I'm saying, but a lot of it has to do with the racinos and the casinos, because what happened, this is my opinion, and from what I've seen, it's basically taken away from it. Like when I was a kid starting here, the track was the only form of legalized gambling here. So if you wanted to wager, you went to the races, and that was it. Where now there's, we've got so many different forms. Like same thing. I could turn my phone off right now, and I could either be betting the races, or I can be playing online slots or whatever for money, and I don't have to leave where I'm at. And that all got taken away. And it's just the way the industry is, and what I see a lot of it is, especially for the younger generations that would maybe come to the track, what they're seeing in it, and I see this in different equestrian events too, we're not entertaining enough. They don't get me wrong, they want to see the races, they love the race itself, but it's the 21, 22 minutes in between posts. What do you do with them guys? They're so used to picking their phone up, and they're hooked into the world to do so many different things at once. And then you say, well, we're not doing anything for 21 minutes. Well, what do we do? So
that's a tough time, man.
And
Really
and
tough.
how do you change that? Like what happens in there to make that change? And I think that's kind of what we got to look at. And like my wife, when I met her, she actually was managing the small track that is actually in our town here at the time. And like you could see that all the time. Like you'd see the local public that were in their late 40s, early 50s. Well, and where I live here, we are not race people. Like this is not hardcore racing country like where we live here. But they'd go up to the window, and it was all harness racing, which it didn't matter. Like it's still horse racing. So, but they'd go up, and they had no idea how to pick a horse in the program. They had no idea, how to read the form or anything like that. And you'd see somebody walk up to the window, they wanted to bet, the pink horse because they liked his colors, and, and whatever, which is fine. And they wanted to bet, a $2 bet, but they'd hear somebody, walk ahead, and it's like, I want the 3 horse, and I want to box him to the 6, and I want the da. And you'd literally watch these people turn around and walk the other way, because at the same time too, they didn't want to look stupid when they walked up to the window, and that to me is a big thing. What goes on, we don't educate them enough, and I think that's a lot to do with it, and even now, like I show people like the racing forum doing different things, and you might as well, for the most part, you might as well hand them a Chinese dictionary if they don't understand it. Like to me, it's got to the point where I think we should go the other way, and we should maybe simplify it a little bit for some of these people. Like I get the other side of it, where there's the hardcore people that really understand it and get it, but most people anymore are not those people, especially not out here. They're just not.
Well, I think simplifying it is not really necessary. I think that like some of the kids just need to expand their thinking, and that's what it is. But I think you're right with the time in between the races. But for the younger generation, for the kids that are trying to get involved, there could be some other events, some other stuff happening that can entertain them. That might be a consideration.
Yeah. Like I look at, and we're apples to oranges, but like, when we have a race night here at our place, like on a Friday night or whatever, and this is our backyard, I'll get 150 to 200 people here, and depending on what it is, like lots of nights, if we've got like like an organization of some sort coming out, we'll have like a little petting zoo set up and different things. After the races are in between, we get pony rides and horse rides or whatever. And I understand at the same time too, some of these bigger facilities and plants, they can't operate that way. But like, just the thing is, people actually can connect, when they can walk down and, actually pet one, horses that just ran or is going to run or whatever. And then, 20 minutes later, actually getting on that horse and be able to walk them around. And, and I understand that, in the real racing, that's not a factor, but I think it's not a bad idea to try to adopt some of this kind of stuff. Like how do you get these people more involved?
Well, I mean, that's the key moment right there. And I mean, once again, want to let people know we're speaking with Roy Sturgeon from Flying Cross Jockey Club. He's located down in Alberta. It has a really tremendous program going on. It kind of like it piques the interest of a lot of people I see online. People are curious about to know what the program provides, how they can get involved, kids, and Roy, again, you said it's not only for kids, people who want to touch up on their skills, their writing skills, right?
Oh, for sure, absolutely. Like when I same thing when I started riding, like as a kid, race riding here, and I don't want to date myself, but like going back then, we had the two main tracks in the city, like Edmonton and Calgary. We had the B track, which was Lethbridge, which still runs in Grand Prairie, that still runs in the summer. There was a track outside of Calgary called Trout Springs, and then there was the fair tracks. And me and a friend of mine, we were talking here last winter, and we were counting them up. And at one time, there was 26 fair tracks that ran in Alberta. They'd run one weekend or 2 weekends a year, but those tracks are all gone. There's none of them left. None of them.
Oh, wow, man.
And that's where, like I said, you took, even somebody that was maybe, even riders, they got too big to ride in the city. Well, they could drop down and they could ride, with the B tracks and still be able to maintain weights. Or if they, got to the point where it was even tough there and they still wanted to ride, they could just drop down and they could ride on the bushes and they could just ride on the weekends just for fun. They could ride the card because most of them bush tracks, they race 3 days a week. They rode Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. They had three, and they'd run 30 races. They'd have a 10 card race at all them places.
Well, I can tell you this, man. I spent a lot of time at Woodbine, and there's a lot of jockeys there.
Yeah.
I mean, they all don't get to ride, but there's a lot of
No.
jockeys. So, I mean, having a B or C track would be tremendous to
Yeah.
help these guys, just to get rides.
And that's what they need. They need mounts. Like the one year I got, I was leading apprentice here and I did very, very well. And then I got hurt like bad and I was out for the better part of the year. And I dropped down to Lethbridge that one summer and I rode there. Well, that's where I actually learned how to ride because then I was getting on volumes of horses. Like I had 5 and 6 calls in every race. Basically I had the pick of whatever I wanted to ride. And like, I think I was third leading rider there year, and I galloped 2 horses the entire meet because, like, not that I didn't want to work, but I was still riding in the city. So they'd name me on horses on the weekends, and I'd just go down and ride on the weekends, and then still ride in Edmonton like during the week, like because I was racing. Well, Tuesday to Friday, I'd race in Edmonton and then go race down there on the weekends. But that's where I really got to learn because I could get on so many horses.
I wanted to know, actually, let you tell the people how important that is, actually, because there's a lot of guys that don't get the experience to ride in the big races, and having those experiences riding the smaller tracks, it might just help them.
Oh, helped them a ton. Like some of the, and this goes back in history, like way before my time, but like some of the very best riders in the world came right here from Alberta, and that's where they rode for the most part was those tracks. Like George Wolf is one, Red Pollard is another. They both rode here. Another one is Johnny Longden, one of the best riders in the world, and they all rode at that track in Lethbridge. It still exists. Like that's where those guys rode. Donnie Macbeth, Hall of Fame rider. He passed away here a few years ago. He's from Red Deer, which is a few miles from where I live. I unfortunately never got to meet the guy. Like he was long gone before I started, but all the guys, they all rode right there at that track and all of the little tracks, like that was the thing too, where a bunch of them, and we had lots of great riders come out of here. Like those are just, a handful. Like some of the very best came from here, like Ronnie Hansen, Jimmy Fitzsimmons. I can go on for hours of the great riders that came out of here. But we learned to ride on these tiny, tiny little tracks. We rode on half mile and 5/8 bull range tracks. Well, we were, for lack of better words, we were fearless because we didn't know any different. Like I watch, the first time I ever rode horse on a mile racetrack, I'm like, where do I go? Like I'd never seen so much real estate in my life. And I watch, and I watch races now, and I watch everybody on them big tracks, and you watch, they hit the head of the lane and they're like 5-6 wide on the turn. Like, that never happened here. Like you're on the fence, and if you're not on the fence, like you're in trouble when you get back, when you pull up, like in a lot of trouble, because it was tight turns. And if you weren't on the front end, our deal was hopefully you'd be sitting just off the pace, and if you were lucky, the horse would blow the turn enough that you could come through up on the inside. And if the hole was there, you bloody well better be going through it. Where I watch, I watch a lot of these big races. And don't get me wrong, I understand what these guys are doing, but like I'll see a horse that's, on the rail, he's five, 6 wide on the rail. They hit the head of the lane and they pull to the outside and go around. Well, why? Like to me, you could have drove a bus through there. But that's just the difference in how we learn to ride here. Where you take a lot of people that have learned to ride on these large racetracks, that was just never an issue. They learned to kind of stay in their lane and kind of go out and around. Not all riders do that, but a lot of them do.
Well, that's the kind of program that you're providing that can actually give guys the confidence to actually get between them spaces.
Like our little track, like it's tight, like it's a training track, and it's about 3/8 of a mile, maybe a little bit longer, but not much. But like these kids, they number one, first of all, they learn how to ride around them turns, and the other thing that they need to learn how to do right off the bat as they get going, they learn how to switch leads on these horses because they have to. They have to learn how to make them horses switch leads. And I've got kids that are 12 to 14 years old that'll make them horses switch leads in every turn.
I wanted to ask you about something that you just touched on earlier, which was riding on the small tracks, and now guys have the opportunity to ride on the big tracks. Is that something that you guys as jockeys dream to be doing, be on those big tracks?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, the first time I ever got to ride on one, it's like I was like a awestruck kid in school. When you got onto a huge playground in the city for the first time, it's like, where does this end? For me, where I was, all the tracks I ever rode on, the quarter pole was either halfway down the backside or the start of the first turn, like not at the head of the lane. So that's the other thing too. Not that it's a hard thing, but you got to remember then how to retrain yourself because them marker poles are all in different places.
yeah. yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I watched some tracks and they got 2 finish lines. Some of the tracks do, and jockeys get thrown off because they're thinking is the first finishing line is not that one that they're going to. It's the second finish line. So it's so many.
Honestly, that was probably one of the big ass chewings I ever got. It was the first year I rode. I was an apprentice rider and I was riding in Calgary. And I'm coming down the lane on this horse and I'm going to win the race. I was winning the race. And I stood up half a jump before the wire because I thought I was there and I thought I'd won the race. And this horse on the outside nails me. And like I was in trouble when I got back. Not only that, I think I got a $250 fine from the stewards for not fulfilling to ride out my mount that day. Like back then they were hard on you. But one thing about it, I never quit riding after that, and it was just a rookie mistake. I was a kid and I thought, well, I won the race and, I can just cruise across the wire and I got nailed. So, you learn how to finish and ride these horses out past the wire because back in those days it was fines and it was days and they meant it. And there was no gray areas there.
Is that something that you also teach the kids as well?
Yep. We'll give kids in this program days, for different things, not so much for different riding infractions. Like if it got bad enough, like it's not like they're trying to do it maliciously or anything like that. But what it does is it then makes them pay more attention. If they say, okay, you're not riding next Friday night or whenever, you see some pretty sad faces on them kids, but then they kind of take it a little bit more to heart because at the same time too, I think they got to be accountable, for their actions and some of this stuff. Like we had a little girl that rides here, and this was last winter, kind of early spring, and it was cold. And, the one weekend she didn't show up because she didn't feel like coming. And then it warmed up, and the next week she's here. And she said to me, she says, I said to her, I said, well, why didn't you come last week? It was cold, and I really didn't want to come. And I said, well, that's okay. I said, but you're not riding this weekend. I said, you can do all your chores and you can do everything else, but you can sit on the rail and you can watch these kids. She said, well, I don't want to ride. And I said, well, you should have thought of that when everybody else was here doing all your work. And the next time we were here.
I got to ask you about that because I speak to a lot of guys my age and your age. And sometimes we get a little bit annoyed because of, the kids these days are a little bit privileged, as they say. They want everything handed to them, and is that always when you see the kids' faces and you tell them those words to let them know, look, man, you got to get out there and actually perform some of these duties and do some work. How does that impact you at all, or do you say, look, you got to learn this?
No, we there's no gray areas there. They learn, like the same thing. Like out here where we live, we can get some brutal weather. Like, there's lots of days these kids are here in the middle of the winter and it's like 45, maybe even 50 below some days. But at the same time too, these animals need looked after. They just do, which everybody on our end of the world understands. But it's the kids, it's like, they show up because, it's 33 degrees and the sun's shining and there's a nice breeze and whatever, but as soon as we get like a drop of rain or, it's a little bit cold or whatever, they're not coming. Well, we just, they're just, they get a couple chances. They're just told, like either you're part of this with everybody else or you're not, like, a very good friend of mine, and a bunch of people will know this guy. Bruce Phelan is a really good friend of mine. Bruce rode here for years, and he was riding when I very first started riding, and then he trained for years. And then when I ran our place as a training stable, our training center, Bruce had the majority of the horses here, and he was a great guy to work for. And I'll never forget this. One year we were in Edmonton, we were just kind of getting started for the year, and I was up there just galloping some babies for him the one morning. And he called everybody into the tack room. And this is what I tell everybody. And it actually makes sense. He said, we are all a team. And he meant it. Like he was all about being a team. But he said, here's the deal. He said, our team is a big wheel with a bunch of spokes. And he said, every person in this team is one of them spokes. And he said, we will get rid of the bad spokes. He said, if you want to be part of the team and get along and do everything that everybody's asked and whatever, you will stay. But like he always told everybody, he said, it doesn't take a lot of spokes to make that wheel run smooth as long as you've got the good spokes in there. But if you've got somebody in there that's, bucking the system or whatever, they're just not part of it because it just brings it down. And what we're doing here is fun. Like we're not trying to race horses for a living or anything like that. I'm trying to show kids the history of horse racing, how good it basically was to me and my family over the years, what I was fortunate enough to get out of it. And at the same time too, we just don't put up with any drama in the barn. If there's that, we either end it, or if it gets bad enough, you're just not part of it, because it honestly, what happens after a while, it just puts poison into it, and that's not what this program is about, or will it ever be about.
Well, I think it's a great program. I think it's something else that kids can do besides, a lot of times kids, we got the programs here in Ontario. Every Saturday, you send the kids to swimming, you send them to volleyball, basketball, you send them to workshops, different things just to keep their brains occupied and keep their
Yeah.
limbs active, and so they can be healthy, active kids. And there's something else for them to do, something to learn. I go on the back stretch at Woodbine, and I see young kids just kind of learning,
Yeah.
and some of them tell me that this has helped them, just being there and learning how to do some serious work,
Yeah.
and they may not stay forever, but it gives them a good lesson in life. So
Oh, for
that's all we
sure.
can ask for.
Like the guy that took me to the track, a guy named Bud Mathis, like he was, one of the best trainers here in his day. And his daughter was actually, that's how I got to the track. We showed horses together as kids, and then he took me to the races. And the first year I was at the races, the first summer, I wasn't quite old enough to ride, so I galloped horses all that spring and all that summer before I started riding like that fall. But even that fall, when I was working for him, when I first started excuse me, started riding races, I was still doing all the galloping in his barn, and I was doing the pony, and he had a pony horse, and I ponied all the horses. And the days that I rode, when I was done, if he had a horse in, as soon as I was done riding, then I come back and I walked tots out that night. Like that was just what it did. And there was no, well, I rode tonight and I don't feel like coming. Like you didn't even think of that. Like it just wasn't an option. You just learned to work.
Now, I know. Speaking of that, because we're touching on a few things, and the jockeys, you know, is it still a thing for jockeys to work within the barn to get the mounts? I mean, you're not involved completely with that side of the world, but is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a thing. Like, like the younger riders, or some of the riders that aren't doing as good, that struggle. Yeah, they're spending a lot more time in the barn. Because first of all, they have to. Like when I race road, we'd get paid all spring, like to gallop horses in spring training. First day of the races, that was it. We galloped horses for nothing after that. Like that was part of it. We would gallop or breeze horses on the premise that we were going to get to ride them or something in the afternoon. But I know now, like, with less racing, especially here and days and whatever, lots of these riders, I know they get paid to gallop horses or they get paid to do different things in the barn because unfortunately, some of them, that's the only way they can survive, so they have to do more. Like when I started race riding here, the first year I rode here, there's 56 riders here in the room that year, and riders that could ride. There was guys that had rode all over. There's lots of guys that had rode in Toronto for years and come back out here to, kind of finish up their careers. Or what they would do with some of them guys would send, some of them younger guys up from the States, and it was kind of a proving ground. They'd ride here for a season or two and then go back to California or places like that and ride. Like some of the best came here. So you learned to ride against some pretty savvy riders, and you learned a lot. Where now too, and I'm not dishing on our riders in any way, shape, or form, but we just don't have the same stature of riders here that we used to have. Or I'm not even saying the stature. That's maybe a false statement. We don't have the amount of riders that we used to have here.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on a ledge here and say it's just like the racing. The numbers will matter because the more you have, the more the people will improve and get better, and it starts to get better.
And that was the thing too. Like out on the prairies here, there was, there's quite a few tracks like BC. Like they still run at Hastings, but like they used to run 5 days a week. They run 1 day a week there. They had different tracks out there, like smaller, mostly bush tracks, but they ran. Saskatchewan, they don't have any racing left there. This summer, there's nothing over there. That's all gone. Well, that takes a huge toll out of all this stuff. And when you start cutting all the race days at all these tracks, how does this, unfortunately, how does some of this stuff survive? I think my wish or hope or whatever that, and same thing, I might maybe rub a few people the wrong way, but I think some of this in some of this areas needs to go back to more like some of this grassroots racing where it's more just about the fun, because I take a lot of these guys here, and I'm not trying to be negative in any shape or form. And I watch both breeds out here. They struggle so much anymore. Like there's just not enough there to sustain it for these guys. So to me, it's got to, what's happened too, and I've seen it here. Some of the good trainers that we've had here over the years, they've left and went elsewhere because they've had to. Plus, they've taken a bunch of their big name owners with them because obviously you're going to go where the purses are. I understand that, but the people that are left here for the most part are the old men that have trained for years that have been very successful, but they're going to train. They went from 30 to 80 barn horses down to 5 or 6 or whatever because that's what they're going to do. Well, it's hard to, like, how do you sustain that? And you get these new kids coming up that are trying to learn. There's no horses for them to get on.
Yeah, that is very tough. Very, very tough. And one of the things I'm noticing too is say for instance the tracks. And if you take away the tracks, you got thousands of people
unemployed
involved. What do we do with those people?
That's right.
I just did a piece with a guy, a groom, and he told me racing is his life. Without racing, that's it. He's done. He's ended. So those are things we got to consider.
No, for sure. And that was the thing too. Like, the same thing when there was in its heyday here, like I don't know how many people would have been employed at Stampede Park and Northlands Park back in the day when it was good. But, like just on the backside alone in the horses, even in the farms, there was probably, I would say 2,500 to 3,000 people, indirectly employed in the racing business in Alberta. There's maybe, I would say there's not a quarter of that now. Like that's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a lot of people. I was speaking with one of the ladies on the track, and she was concerned too. She says, without the racing happening, she had mentioned about Fort Erie. Erie, there's always rumors about Fort Erie, and she's like, then what happens to these people? These are people who this is all they live for. What happens? Are we considering what's going to happen to these people afterwards? What are they going to do?
Yeah. And that's a big thing. And the other thing is too, like, even on the horse end of it out here, like I watch, like several of our horses, at the end of the day, go to the chuck wagons out here, and like that's a whole different can of worms. I know some people are 100% against it, but at the end of the day, them horses, I don't care, and I know this personally, them horses are very, very well taken care of and maintained, and at the same time too, it gives a bunch of them horses a life. But like back in the day when there was like all the bush racing and all that stuff too, like lots of them horses out here, they'd run into their 20s out here because there was a place for them. I can remember an old horse that ran here for years when I was riding, a horse named Tango King, and I think he actually not in the Northlands is there anymore, but I think the horse to this day holds the track record up there for 3/8 of a mile. And that horse, like they'd run him, they'd get 2 starts in him in the spring because he was unbeatable here in the spring. And then he couldn't run any further. And now, well, they take that horse and then run him in the bush all summer against the best quarter horses. And that horse, he'd win he'd do very well all summer running in the bush, that old horse. But he had a life. And they ran that horse in the city till he was 12 years old.
I want to ask you this because, I saw there was a comment online somewhere, and and somebody was touching on the fact about the gambling and the gambling part, and somebody responded and said, "Hey, look, you worry about your gambling, we worry about our horses." But to be fair, isn't it the gambling that kind of gets the racing connected as well?
Has to be,
because it gotta go together like a relationship.
No, we're like the old guy that took me to the races, like he was a great horseman, and in his day he actually raced at every major racetrack in North America. Like this is going back years ago because they basically had the prairie circuit here where they raced 10 days in each town, like Edmonton and Calgary and Saskatoon, Regina, Manitoba, and Vancouver. But what those guys would do in those days, they would do a handful of things because they didn't have structured meets where they were here for 80 days or 100 days. So when that was over, they would do a few things. They would either quit for the year and they were retired, for the winter, they'd go get a job or do something. Quite a few would come down east. They'd come to Toronto and they'd race down there. But a lot of them guys, what they did is they loaded them horses and they went on the train and then they shipped all over North America and winter raced like in the States. But Bud always told me, and he told me this too, and it's different time and different era, but he said the best the racing ever was out here in the prairies was at the height of the Depression because they only basically raced 10 days in Edmonton and Calgary. Like they still had all that fair meets going where they ran a weekend here and a weekend there, but it was the only form of gambling. So if you wanted to go to the races, you would spend the 10 days going to the races in Edmonton and or Calgary, wherever you're close to, because you only had 10 days to do it. And his idea, and he always said this, he said, at that time too, people were so broke. If they had $2, they tried to win 4. If they win 4, they tried to win 8 because they were so broke it didn't matter. But he said that was the best that the racing ever was here. And he told me this 40 years ago when I very first started riding. He said, we raced too many days here. And he said, eventually it will kill it. And it's funny how that statement has actually become true. Like he said, and like, when I remember when I started riding, the racing was huge here. And, Edmund, like I can remember racing in Northlands on a Tuesday night, there'd be 10, 12,000 people there on a Tuesday night for the races. We'd bet $1 million live on track 40 years ago. Like, so that's a handle. And, but now, like, I don't know what Century is now, but, lots of nights are lucky if they bet 100,000 up there. Well, that's 40 years later. Like, what's wrong with that equation? Like, I understand why it is that way, but, at the end of the day, unfortunately, that's what's happened to our industry and it's blindsided it. And I don't know how we get that back. That's the hard thing. And the hard thing is out here too, like I watch a lot of these guys, that have, had bigger barns or big owners or whatever. These guys are downsizing or relocating their horses or just quitting. Well, how do you survive?
Well, it's something to think about and something that industry should really think about. Horsemen probably can get together, which I would love to see, but it is something to think about if you don't want it to end.
And for me, honestly, truthfully, that's kind of what I try to do here. Like I don't want it to end. When I get we're apples to oranges, we're just a bunch of kids playing in the backyard. But we get to race every Friday night all summer long, and everybody has fun. And everybody brings a picnic cooler or whatever, and we have like a tailgate derby on Friday nights in there. Or we have a couple fun derbies where everybody dresses up, and it's a big deal for the kids and everybody else. And I try to make it, like when we do a race night, it's a race card. We draw for the races. We do, we paddock the horses. We do everything just like it's a real race night. And I want to be able to give these kids that opportunity to do that, because most of them will never get the chance to do that for real.
Yeah, I think it's a really great experience as well for the kids. It doesn't take much to excite children.
No.
These days, they get so bored so fast. So you got to do some different things and keep them really active. I feel so. I always felt that way. You got to keep these kids active.
Like that picture that I sent you yesterday, that little girl like in the sleep of her mom's truck on the way home. Like that
was classic.
That kid's 7, and like she popped out of the gate today on her first horse, like on one of them little ponies. But like they just made that kid's weekend. And the same thing, her mom texted me again tonight. The kid fell asleep again on the way home tonight. Like that kid's done. But them kids had a blast here all weekend. They were in the barn. They were looking after horses. They're cheering each other on. They're dirty. They're sweaty. They're wore out. Like them kids were done at 3:00 this afternoon. They'd had the bun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And that photo that you said, that was great. Great to see that she was really tired, and so forth. Yeah, that for most parents, we want to see that.
Well, her mom said she barely made it out of the driveway, like at our place, leaving here last night. She was just done.
Yeah, we definitely want to see that. So once again, I want to let people know that we're speaking with Roy Sturgeon from the Flying Cross Jockey Club, located down in Alberta, and he's putting on a really tremendous program down there that helps the community and also helps the kids get involved, and for kids who want to learn how to ride or want to improve their riding skills. I know there's you're telling me about the derbies and the direction that the program is heading. You said that are you guys going to the Stampede as well?
We'll go to Ponoka Stampede. Ponoka Stampede is about 10 miles north of where we live here, and we're fortunate enough. The one girl that's in the program, her dad is actually on the Stampede board. So for the people that don't know, Ponoka Stampede is the second largest stampede out here, probably the second largest stampede in Canada behind Calgary. So we've been invited this is our 3rd year. The kids will race right before the chuck wagon races every night up there. So like last year, a couple of the nights they were racing, in front of 11 to 12,000 people up there every night. And that place goes crazy when these kids race. Like that place just comes apart.
Yeah, you sent some videos. That was awesome to watch.
Yeah.
Just love hearing the excitement of the kids and the people cheering for them. It's pretty cool. Really,
they
really
go ballistic. Cool. It goes crazy up there when them kids race.
Yeah, you know what? That'd be a nice attraction here as well, too, just to have, especially for younger kids. I mean, put some marketing into it. Have
the same thing too. Anybody that is trying to think about doing some of this kind of stuff, they're more than welcome to reach out to me or us or whatever if they're trying to organize something, because I think it's needed in a lot of areas. I've just seen where it's good for kids, and it doesn't matter. If it's the racing aspect of it or if it's another, to me, it's just another organized sport that has turned out to be pretty cool. Like it's, and I'm fortunate enough here that we've basically got all the guts of it. We've got a track here and we've got a gate, and, we started out with a few old lesson horses, and, we're like I talked to you earlier, we're trying to expand and we're trying to do some different things, which we will get there, but you don't have to have tons to start with either, and we've been fortunate too, every once in a while I'll put a post out on Facebook or something that we need, different or, more equipment or whatever. And lots of people have been very good about stepping up and donating stuff to us. Like, there's a friend of mine. She actually runs the jocks room in New Mexico. Well, a couple of years ago, she sent up 40 sets of colors for these kids, colors that were unclaimed in the room. So anything like that, we're more than appreciative, because, most of these kids, they don't have any of this kind of stuff. And it's fun for them to, wear the colors and get dressed up and actually have like a real race day. And, and we're always looking for tack. Like we're same thing with kids around. You're always wrecking things, or same thing as the programs went ahead. We now need more stuff. Like exercise saddles, always we're looking for, or bridles, or anything like that. So anything that anybody's willing to let up, we're more than willing to take it off your hands.
That's pretty cool, man. You don't understand how intrigued I am with what you're doing, because and for you, I'm pretty sure for you and the guys involved in what you're doing, to watch your program progress and to grow must have a really good feeling. But to watch it grow maybe too big, that's one thing you won't want to let go, man.
No, and that's the thing. We're going to be very conscious of how it progresses. And don't get me wrong, I've had different people say, "Oh, we're going to do this, and this," and not that I don't entertain their ideas, but I don't ever want it to change from what it is. Like I want to keep it the way it is. Like, if we got to add a different night to accommodate more kids, absolutely, I'm all over that. But to change it so we're actually like racing for real and stuff like that, I don't want to do any of that kind of stuff. To me, it takes away from what we're trying to do. These kids, at the end of the day, then they start getting too competitive, because, and it's not, like I said, it's not like they're trying to be malicious or anything, but they're not riding as heads up as what they could and should be when they start doing that. And this is what I even said to Chrissy, like the first year after we went to Pinoca, because like by the time we got them kids ready to go, and we were asked to get ready to go, those kids rode every day for 6 weeks, like straight, sometimes 2-3 lessons a day, getting them kids ready for what we thought was coming, because they had no idea what was going to be expected of them. Big crowd noises, all that kind of stuff. It's a little bit different, running around our little track in the backyard here, and you got Chrissy calling the races or somebody else, and if you got a kid out there that's green or a green horse, you can say, everybody kind of be quiet. When this kid comes by the first time, da 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 da. Well, you got 12,000 screaming fans at them kids.
Yeah.
They're not going to be quiet. So
No.
we do a lot of things to get horses and kids ready to make sure we can make them as safe as possible. So going forward, even them kids, they raced up there, and I told Chrissy when the last horse pulled up on the Sunday night down there, and we were done, and we were walking back, when we were done, and I told her, I said, there's no more of what we've just done. Like, I said, these kids now need better equipment. I said, if they're going to ride here and, and race the way they are, they need better stuff, because same thing on our little track, them horses, don't get me wrong, they were running, but they weren't running to the level that they were running up there. And them kids ride, they rose to it to the point where they're never going back to where it was 2 years ago. They're that good, and I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but these kids ride well, like, and the same thing, I'm sure different people, when they see the videos that I share with you, or I share them to different people, or the same thing when people come to watch these kids for the first time, they think, oh, there's a bunch of kids and we're going to dress them up in colors and they're going to canter around the track. Well, it's far from it. Like, they race, and they race competitively, and it's
Wow.
pretty cool to watch that. And me, either race riding with them or on my own riding horse, you can hear them kids, they're yelling at each other going around the track, we're here, or watch for this or whatever. Them kids are actually, they're making decisions out there. They're talking to each other and making sure that they're looking after each other and their horses out there. So that's pretty cool to watch.
I think that's part of the program that I think what you just mentioned about, the calling and the shouting and yelling, and you got to identify, just like in any sport, let people know where you at, right? And for instance, if you're coming through a space, you might want to alert the person in front of you that you're coming. I was wondering something, because you used to be a race rider, and does this program help other types of riders as well, or strictly for race riding?
No, like, we've got a few kids in the lesson barn that ride, and they ride with these kids, but they don't want to race, and that's fine. But I use a lot of what I teach these kids, to get them started, like galloping horses, even with my beginner riders, because it helps a lot with their balance. Like we've got the group, and they call them the Derby dames, and mostly they're the moms of the kids, like, that are here. and basically what it is, it's a boot camp for the moms. Like there's maybe two of them potentially will, eventually maybe, pop it out of the gate to the wire, which is fine, but they're not about racing. They don't want to. But what they do is they learn how to, gallop horses and do, a lot of that same exercises that we would do that I teach these kids. They get very fit at it. And the other thing is too, they have a whole new appreciation now for what their kids do.
Yeah.
Because like the same thing, our track's little, and then kids gallop around there a couple times, and you'll get a parent saying, well, that kid didn't get much of a lesson tonight, they only went around the track 2 times. Well, you get on and go galloping around there 2 rounds. Well, now that they've done it, now they have a whole different appreciation. They hit the head of the lane and they look like a wounded lipizan, like they're done, because it's a lot of work. Nobody that's ever galloped.
Hey, let me tell you, that's a big lesson. We went horseback riding, me and my wife, a couple of years ago, and we watched some grown people who just shivered on top of the horse and just jumped off and said that was it. So you them kids going around, that's a big lesson. It's more than a lesson, man. Not everybody can do that,
And the funny thing is, we got one boy that in this program. He's 13 and pretty positive this kid is going to go to Pinoca, but he hasn't rode that long. Long story short, but out here too, like we're in Western Canada, so we're redneck cowboys, including me. Like I roped and rodeoed lots. In my other life too. Like I rodeoed for years, but the trouble is too, you get these boys in this program. First of all, we're a riding stable, so these kids have no choice. 18 and under to wear a helmet. It's just how it is. Like that's our insurance states that's how it is. But the hard thing is, and I've lost a few boys because, out here, the mentality is still, we're cowboys and we don't have to wear helmets, and you're a girl if you wear helmets and whatever. And so I have lost a few boys. But the funny thing was, there's some kids kind of picking on this kid, a couple of weeks ago, like at school, and they're like, oh, you're a girl because you ride English, even though he's galloping horses. They don't understand the difference, which whatever. But he finally showed him a few videos of what these kids do, like racing, and then showed him some real races and different stuff that happens in the races. That ended it right there. It shut him up. Right. Because all of a sudden, the Joe Cool hockey players and football players, they weren't quite as tough or quite as talented as what they thought they were. So it was kind of cool to see that side of it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, but also very good. I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, and he stood up for himself because he's not that kid, or not was, before wasn't. And I found that with lots of the kids in this program, like they were, not all of them, but we've had quite a few of these kids in this program that were severely bullied, like at school or different things, more than anything because they were doing something different. And this goes to all aspects of life, but here, this is their own thing, and they at the end of the day, I guess, however, they get to own it. This is their thing, and when they put the time and effort into it, and they get to ride races and whatever, it's pretty cool.
It's funny how people and kids get bullied over any and everything. It doesn't have to be much at all.
Well, the funny thing is, got a new kid that just started. She actually she's been riding here, but she took the camp this weekend, and she's got a wicked sense of humor, and I'm bugging her all the time. Or all these kids, I tease them quite a bit. And she brought me a shirt that she made me wear this weekend. It says, "Be a buddy, not a bully." So now I have to wear this shirt. But it equates lots into a lot of different things. And honestly, I'm not sure that's on a tagline we won't start to use with these kids because it resonates a lot of truth.
Absolutely, man. So I guess we're not going to see you in Ontario this year.
No, we're coming. We're coming.
You're coming?
Yeah.
And where exactly are you coming? Are you coming to Woodbine?
We're coming to Woodbine. Actually, Chrissy's son, he trains and drives harness horses down there, but he's getting married in August. So we're coming down there for a few days. So I'm going to, once we finalize a few things, I'm going to talk to Robbie again, like the outrider. He's a friend of mine from out here. And we'll try maybe hook it up and see if we can do something with these kids again. But for sure, I want to hook up with you when I'm down there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to that, actually. That'll be real cool and real special for me, at least. I really try my best to keep connected with the people who I talk to and who I meet because, this world, even though it's really big, it could be very small at sometimes,
Well, like the old guy that took me to the races always used to tell me this. He said, be nice to them people on the way up because you're going to need them on the way back down. And he wasn't wrong.
Hey man, those are wise words, and we all went through those struggles. We all know what that's all about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, on that note, I want to let everybody know this is Roy Sturgeon. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Roy. I mean, come back again anytime. Let the people know about the program. I'm always willing to share videos and to let people know what's happening. I think it's a tremendous program. I really hope and I wish and I think it's going to grow bigger and bigger. I really do hope that you can control it once it gets bigger, Roy.
Well, no, we will because we'll keep control of it, and that's the thing. I'm not gonna get to something that it should never be. Like I would honestly, I think I would disband it before it ever got to that.
Yes, absolutely. All right. On that note, thanks again. Thanks for your time, Roy. And let's end it like that and come back again anytime soon, my friend.